Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us this afternoon. It is great to be live with you here on Facebook. My name is Ashley, and I'm a member of the 10th Wave Chamber Music Collective, and I'm also joined by Weily, who's our clarinetist. And we're really excited to introduce a fantastic composer to you today, Viet Cuong. And Viet has written a piece called Fine Lines that premiered last year in the spring, and we're really excited to include it in our upcoming dance concert that's going to happen next spring 2021. Our concert is going to feature music by Asian and Asian American composers, as well as collaboration with 5 dancers who are going to be choreographed by a local dancer named Yuki Tokuda. So thank you for joining us today, Viet.
Thanks for having me. I'm here in Marietta, Georgia right now.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Is that where you kind of are living right now?
Yeah, I grew up here in Marietta, and after many years away, I'm teaching at Kennesaw State University, which is right next door. So yeah, it's like fun to be back in the hometown for this year at least.
What are you teaching at Kennesaw?
Oh, I'm teaching music composition and theory.
I thought maybe to start off, we could go into some just fun icebreaker questions just to kind of get to know you a little bit more. So what was your primary instrument, or what is your current primary instrument?
It was kind of 2, is percussion and clarinet.
Oh, that's so fun.
Yeah.
So as you know, I'm a clarinetist, but my husband is a percussionist. So you can
Oh, cool.
like all this percussion gear behind me.
Mm-hmm.
That's fun. So what kind of groups do you like to write for? Like, what instrumentation do you enjoy writing for?
I really enjoy everything. I guess I would have the most experience with writing for like mixed chamber ensembles, as well as orchestra and concert band music. I haven't done a lot of vocal music, but I'm trying to get more into that. But like recently, I really like writing for woodwinds, especially. So, but yeah, I kind of like everything. Anyone who will, commission me, I'll do it.
And same with clarinet. So actually, I'm really curious, which instrument did you start with first?
Yeah, actually, it's like an interesting story. Well, I actually like started on piano when I was really young, but I didn't really take to it very well. I just didn't like practicing when I was like 5. But when I joined like middle school band, I played percussion because that was like the instrument that any band director who sees any people who used to play piano like will want them to play percussion because the keyboard layouts are the same. And so I played percussion for like all of middle school and high school, but when I joined marching band in high school, I was in like the front ensemble, otherwise known as pit, where we played like mallet percussion instruments. And in parades, like the pit percussion members didn't get to really play anything fun. They played like sleigh bells or cymbals, and I didn't want to do that. So I learned clarinet to play in parades, basically. And throughout high school, like a lot of my friends were clarinet players. So I got more and more like serious with clarinet. By the end of high school, I think I was kind of equally both. And then when I went to college, I just studied clarinet. I took clarinet lessons in college.
You went to college at the Peabody Institute, is that right?
Yeah. I wasn't a clarinet major, but I took lessons with Ed Palenker, who played bass clarinet in the Baltimore Symphony. So that was kind of the peak of my clarinet playing. And then I got kind of a lot busier with writing music. So I played less and less. I've actually just recently gotten more into playing clarinet again, and it's been really fun to get back to that.
When did you first start getting into composition? When did it kind of spark you to start writing your own music?
It's like kind of tied to the whole like thing where I didn't like to practice piano. But I didn't like to practice like music, but I liked to like make up my own things on the piano when I was younger. Like around 7 or 8, I started just to like make up really simple like improvisations basically. And I didn't really write them down until middle school when one of my band directors introduced me to Finale Notepad, which at the time was like the free music notation software. So like very limited, but and I started to like actually input all of the like little improvisations I had into Finale Notepad. And then I started to get more interested in writing like music that was similar to what we were playing in band class. Because that's kind of like all the music I knew other than like solo piano music that I would come across in my piano lessons. But that was kind of all I knew. It was like band music. So I go home and try to like write music like these composers that I was exposed to in band class.
Initially, when we were looking to put together our dance program, we had found your piece Pulse Train, and then you kind of recommended something that was more recent that you had written. So Fine Lines is based on these sets of Picasso drawings that were essentially just him using a pencil, right? And then not lifting the pencil at all to make these kind of abstract little drawings of things. How did you decide to base your piece on these?
Growing up, my parents were big fans of of painters, like from kind of like around Picasso time, a little bit earlier, like impressionist painters as well. And so we like growing up around the house, they hung up these like 80s lacquered like reproductions of like Monet and Gauguin and Renoir, and there was also some Picasso. And the one that was like that I remember the most was the Picasso's Dove. And so I'd always like kind of knew about that. Yeah, exactly. And he has some like variations of that one as well, like some that have like little figures like dancing around the dove. There was a couple in the house. I think my dad particularly was quite drawn to those, and I always just liked that dove drawing a lot, just because it, like the simplicity of it, but also like at the same time, like capture how he could capture like the spirit and the essence of a dove with just like a couple lines was really amazing to me. And so it always stuck with me. And then I had wanted to write a piece about about maybe that, or maybe some of the other line drawings. As years like went on, I learned that there were other drawings other than just the dove, of other animals and various things. So I decided it was the time to write like a movement about the dove, and then a couple other animals and the dancers that I chose after looking through several of the line drawings.
Yeah, this one in particular, I feel like I'm going to hold up this one for everyone to see. The dancers one, I just love how you can still get a sense of all of that movement, even though it's really just a couple of lines here and there.
And I also like how each of the dancers has its kind of own personality, but they're still like cohesive as well.
I really, in particular, like the one on the right. Just looks like they're having a good time.
Yeah, the idea behind the 3 dancer movements is that each one has the same, generally the same like rhythms and notes, except the pitches are different between all of them. So it's like they all are the same material, but then because the pitches and therefore the chords are different, they each have their own personality, but at the same time they kind of belong together. And actually each of the dancer movements kind of pairs along with one of the animals. So like the melodic ideas and whatnot like kind of carry over from like the first dancer to the grasshopper, and the second dancer kind of pairs with the sparrow, and the dove pairs with the last dancer.
Oh, that one I think was maybe one of my favorites. I felt like I could just listen to that one on repeat for just ever and ever. It's very expansive in the feel of it.
Mm-hmm.
I think what I really love now even more is that it seems like there was a really personal tie to it that you drew from your own childhood.
Yeah, and that one actually uses this chord progression that I've liked since I was a kid too. So it's kind of like a nostalgic thing to write.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
So cool. Yeah, I love hearing the way things are kind of bending. It's like you can hear that there's that solid note kind of happening in the piano, but the other instruments are going in between a bit.
And the thing I like about the sparrow is like it's like so cute looking, but it also has like kind of a menacing look on its face.
Yeah, it kind of does.
So I was trying to capture that with like the little like jaunty rhythm, like offbeat thing, but then also it kind of has like a sinister quality to it as well.
It kind of looks a little bit like it's like looking downward, or if that's its eye.
Yeah, or it's like it's really concentrating on something.
Yeah.
And I think it's so amazing that like you can like we are discussing the mood of this sparrow, and it's just like essentially one line, single line.
Yeah.
I like this like kind of art where the process is somehow a part of the finished product, or even with the Picasso, it's um, like the fact that it is a line drawing and it's so simple. It's like you kind of anyone can, in a way, like think like, oh, I could like almost draw that. Obviously, like there's so much nuance in it, and like which make them really great. But like it's the simplicity of it is so attractive to me because it's like you know what the process was. It was like he had a pencil or a pen and then he drew the lines, and that's like essentially all it is. Other than like the brilliance behind every like motion of moving the pen or pencil, but um, as opposed to like something more much more complicated where you have to think about like every single brushstroke, like countless brushstrokes that go into like a Monet or something.
And I suppose from as a child you were into Picasso. I mean, what other art have you drawn your inspiration from?
Recently, I feel like a lot of my inspiration has just come from like sounds in general, and the sounds that kind of are the ones that will stick with a listener after the piece is over. Like I try to start with that and then kind of build a piece around that. So when I write for percussion, especially, it's like all about the sounds and kind of the instruments that I'm using or devising to create the sounds. So it's kind of all over the place. But visual art is something that does inspire me in quite a few of my pieces. So I'd say if there's like one thing that the majority of my pieces have inspiration from, it's visual art. Well, I have a piece called Wax and Wire that was inspired by these wire sculptures that were first carved out of wax, and then wire was woven around them, and then the wax was melted out. So that piece was inspired by both the finished product, but also like the process of like melting wax out of wire sculpture. So the piece has these like things that sound like kind of melting wax.
Yeah. I love that whole idea because I think sometimes with art, we are not always talking about the process. Sometimes you just really see the end product.
Have you done a lot of collaborations with like other interdisciplinary arts, other than maybe like having the paintings displayed? Have you ever worked with someone who's like live painting something? Or
No, I haven't. I would love to do that at some point. I've done a little bit of work with dance, but that's usually been like the piece has been written and performed, and then someone will like similar to what we're doing here. But I've never like worked with the choreographer like on a dance piece like from the start. It's kind of what I'm like a dream of mine is to write like a ballet or something like that. See if that ever happens. But I even when it's just like a piece that's already written, I really like seeing what a choreographer will do with the music. Like, and the piece I was talking about, Wax and Wire, was choreographed some years ago in the Bay Area, and it was really great to see that.
I've always wondered that, as a composer, sometimes when you watch a movie, like, are you really listening to the music or are you paying more attention to what's on the screen? So I've always kind of wondered if composers felt like their ideas would ever be taken away from. But
yeah, I think like, I was like watching like when I was watching Parasite like back in the winter in the theater. I I remember just like noticing how good the soundtrack was and how good the like music and everything was in the movie, and how it like really heightened like all of the feelings of like whatever we were feeling, like dread or suspense or whatever. And like I think without it, it would have like, if it was purely like visual and everything was silent, it wouldn't have had the same effect. So I think maybe as musicians we are more aware of that, what's going on in terms of like how much the sound affects our experience with something like a movie. But I think everyone has the same experience whether or not they realize it. It's just because we're musicians, we're like attuned to that.
We've kind of all been in this crazy pandemic right now. And
Mm-hmm.
do you think there's going to be a change to the way we do is there a change on the future of classical music? Do you think we're going to be doing more online concerts now? Do you think that's going to change the way that we present concerts?
I had to think that when there's a vaccine and things can be safely done in large groups of people again, that people will have missed all of this stuff so much that like none of us will ever take it for granted. Like, and I think like maybe I'm being too hopeful or positive, but I also think that like having to do all this stuff online and virtually was kind of something that we had as like a classical music, like we've kind of needed to learn all of these skills for so long, and it's kind of forced everyone to learn them. Like I joke a lot about like how you can go through music school and get like a master's or doctorate in music and still not know how to plug in a mic by the end of all those degrees.
It's true.
And like, isn't that nuts?
Yeah.
Like something as simple as like learning how to plug in a microphone and record yourself with good quality sound is like something we do not learn in school. And so we've all had to like learn these things now if we want to like actually present music in any sort of way that like is good experience for the listener or whoever's tuning into something. So I think after this, like at least we'll all have those like, or if we don't have like, if we haven't mastered those skills, we'll at least have more experience with them.
I definitely wish I was taught a lot of that because it was a hard learning curve. Even just teaching online, I don't know anything about mics or how, if my sound is coming through or what I can tell my students to do on their end.
Yeah, yeah, and like I'm at Kennesaw State, we're like teaching in person, but it's like my theory class is a split modality, so half of the class is online and half is in person, and they always like switch back and forth. Like teaching music theory that way, like I've like connected my iPad to my computer and used Sidecar to make it like a external monitor, and then like have like project the iPad in the classroom, but then also like screen share the iPad online, like things like that. Like at the end of the day, I think we've also realized that like none of this is none of it can seem like a suitable replacement for like in-person music and interaction. So ultimately, I think we'll just like not take it for granted, and hopefully like things will bounce back. I think there'll be like a renaissance of creativity once we all get out of this rut that we're in.
How has that been kind of on your creative and artistic process when you're kind of alone sometimes? Have you been able to feel like you can connect with other artists or musicians? How's that
Yeah.
felt during this time?
Like in some ways, like the pandemic wasn't that different from like a typical composer's life, because even before the pandemic, composers spent a lot of time by themselves. On some level, it didn't feel like that different, like going into lockdown and trying to minimize physical, like, contact with people. But then at the same time, it was really like this year has been really hard for me just to kind of cope with the idea of like not knowing when any of this stuff that I'm working on will be performed, if ever, or just kind of this sense of like dread that everyone's been feeling. Like our whole field is kind of put on like pause, other than us trying to scramble and learn all these online things and everything. And so it took me like months to kind of to mourn like the loss of all of that and to feel creative again. I think for like months I was like trying to force myself to keep writing music, and I like none of it was working for me, and I just took a break and like getting back into it now, and it feels good to like give yourself permission to like take a break and to relax and just to actually, because now I feel like hopeful about like when we get through this, but before, like months ago I was feeling a lot less hopeful about things.
Our ensemble, 10th Wave, is made up primarily of Asian and Asian American performers, and just having that kind of cultural connection and heritage, it felt kind of like an important thing for us to not only be kind of on the back behind the scenes side as well as performing side of setting up this concert. So we really love the idea of being able to feature music that was written by Asian American composers too. How has it been growing up as a person of color living in Marietta, or were there a lot of other kind of Asian groups population there too, or were you kind of like the only one?
I would say I was one of the only ones. It wasn't like I was the only Asian kid in school, but like there weren't many. And it's like a complex thing too, right? Like our identities. And like my parents came here from Vietnam, and especially my mom, she like had to escape. Like she was one of the boat people who came to the U.S. via like a refugee camp from Malaysia. There's like a Wikipedia article about the boat people if you're interested, but it's basically like they had to escape by like kind of cramming themselves into the like bottoms of these fishermen boats that then would like sail to these refugee camps throughout Southeast Asia. And so when my mom came here, she had like nothing, and her kind of mindset was like, I'm gonna assimilate. I'm an American now. That's who I am. And the way I was kind of raised was like, I learned Vietnamese first, but then I like forgot it because my parents really felt strongly like, well, he's American. Like most Americans don't speak Vietnamese, so why would he need to? And so like, I was kind of raised with like the mindset like, yeah, I'm an American. Like I was born here, like just like all my friends here who are, white or whatever, like they were born here too. And why am I any different from them? But then you like, as you go through life, you start to realize like people make assumptions based off of what you look like. And when you don't look like everyone else, when you're a minority, then I think ultimately it comes down to like stereotypes. When you're a majority, like people usually will just like get like when they get to know you, they like you kind of have a blank slate in their eyes. But then when you're a minority, like you don't have as many experiences with other Vietnamese American people or whatever, and so they like their assumptions of you are probably based on like the few other couple like Asian people they've met.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's like why I think it's really important for people of color to be really visible and just like to be themselves and show that like yeah, we're all like individuals too, and we're not like we all have like cultural similarities and things that we like that unite us, but we're all like individuals just like everyone else. And so I think it's like just being visible and breaking down those stereotypes, and being proud of who you are is really important these days, especially. I have to think that maybe sometimes people see my name and they assume one way, like something about my music from my name, like that I will have sort of like this synthesis of Eastern and Western music in my own music, or that I just like wasn't born in the US just because my name is Viet. And so I guess those things, like, I think, I'd like to think that that doesn't happen, but I have to think it doesn't on some level. And so I think like the main hurdle is just to like get my music out there and for people to actually hear it and to hear my music for who I am and not like any assumptions that they have based off of what my name looks like in a concert program.
Well, I guess our last question. We unfortunately lost Weily. Her internet went out. But do you have any kind of upcoming projects in the near future that you're excited about premiering or having performed?
Yeah. Well, this like thing that's come together pretty quickly with the New York Philharmonic. It's this project that they're doing called Bandwagon, which is like kind of pick up concerts throughout the city that are chamber concerts, and they're done outside and they're free. I'm running a piece for the countertenor Anthony Roth Costanzo, and a trio of woodwinds, so clarinet, oboe, and bassoon. So we're really excited about that, and they'll be performed later this month in undisclosed locations, so that huge crowds don't form. Because they want to bring live music to the communities, but also keep it safe and everything. And I'm writing other smaller chamber projects as well, and I'm excited for those. I kind of hadn't done chamber music in a long time, and then the pandemic has kind of forced that to happen, and so I'm happy about that, to kind of pare things down again, and still have other orchestral and wind ensemble projects in the future as well.
This is a question from Gail, and she's wondering, how would you encourage beginner or first-time composers, especially young students?
Yeah, I think as a teacher, what you can do to encourage them is just to not feel like there are any limitations on the music they can write, in terms of like, oh, it has to sound like Mozart, or it has to, this is too hard, or this is whatever. Like, just kind of to let a fresh, like, young composer kind of just try out whatever they want, and to feel like anything is possible. And then from there, like, they'll learn themselves what is like most practical necessarily. And also I think it's important for like young composers to give them lots of listening, kind of just things that, like, suggestions as to things they can listen to, just so that they have a more broad sense of what's out there. Like, I wish when I was, in middle school, that someone had introduced me to, Prokofiev or something. It took me till college to really listen to any Prokofiev. So just like to give young musicians like a wide variety of things to listen to, classical or not.
Yeah, I think I like that idea of not just showing them kind of like the typical, like, your Beethoven, your Mozarts, and all of those,
Mm-hmm.
but also to introduce young people to music that maybe isn't standard, or maybe not always classical too.
Yeah, and also to show them that music can be written by a wide variety of people.
Yes,
um, just basically to inspire them, with like the end goal is to inspire them.
Another question, this is coming from Ari, who you corresponded with via email. And she was asking, when thinking of writing for voice, would you consider crossing musical genres?
Yeah, I mean, why not? I guess like just the performers that usually I'm writing for are probably going to be like classically trained. So I think it would be important that whoever I'm writing for is comfortable with whatever voice, like vocal inflection or style I want them to sing in. Because I think sometimes classical musicians don't like to not use like vibrato. So it's just like, it would be like more a concern of like making the singer comfortable. Obviously there are singers who are comfortable singing in any like sort of style, and so it would just be like making sure that the piece was written to their strengths.
Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon, and it's been so nice getting to hear more about you and about the piece that we're going to be performing. And yeah, this is really
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's really nice to like meet you all and to get kind of to learn more about what you're going to be doing with the piece. I'm really excited. And